Welcome, everyone. Hope you're having a good day at the Civo Navigate Conference Day 2. And very excited about this panel because we're going to talk about tech communities, local meetups. We have a really amazing set of panelists here who will introduce themselves shortly. My name is Kunal. I work as a DevRel manager at Civo. And yeah, let's kick off some introductions. Nelly, would you like to go first?
Yeah, hello, my name is Nele. I work as a developer advocate for Fiberplane, and here in Berlin, I'm organizing the DevOps community, but also I'm part of the organization group of DevOps. So that are the two meetup groups where I'm involved.
Benazir?
Hi, everyone. I'm Benazir. I'm a community program manager at Microsoft, and I basically organize meetups for the Kubernetes and Cloud Native Berlin meetup group. We put Berlin everywhere to make it very clear that this is for the Berlin local community. But having said that, we also invite speakers from everywhere who are visiting Berlin, who are in the city, or who are interested in learning more about the Berlin tech scene.
Cool. Kadir, you want to go next?
Hello, everyone. Kadir here. I represent AWS User Group Berlin. I'm also part of AWS Förderverein, the communities collection for DACH region. Actually, happy to be here. Thank you for the opportunity.
Do you also work at AWS?
Oh no, that comes often. To be clear, I don't work for AWS. So we are just the community, people of AWS users, and we are quite independent. Yeah.
Cool. Stephen?
Yes, I'm a developer advocate at Zilliz, and I organize the MLOps community in Berlin and also an unstructured data meetup. So I have 2 meetups in Berlin.
Cool. I found out about Kubernetes from a local meetup. So that shaped my trajectory. I was just looking for projects to contribute to, and I found Kubernetes. And I learned about open source at local meetups. My question to the panelists, just to kick it off, is what role do you think meetups and just local communities play in like shaping forward the future of tech? Let's start with Benazir.
So I personally think it's one of those ground zero efforts that you can take to just join a meetup group, but you don't even have to join right away. You can attend 1 or 2 meetups and see whether these are topics that you're potentially interested in. Forget about a career in it, in the future, but if it's something that you'd like to kind of, start off with just beginning to understand some of these key concepts and then go from there. So I think a meetup is really one of those organic level playing fields where everyone feels like, yeah, there's a little something that I can take away from this. I don't need to know everything from the get-go. And the things that I'm interested in, I will find mentors, I'll find seniors who I can work with, who I can network with, and who I can learn from.
Yep, it's a very interesting point. And before the other panelists answer, I'll just maybe tweak a question a little bit so we can get more diverse answers. So there are 2 parts to it. Why would you join a meetup group? Why would you become an organizer? So Nelly, you want to go?
That's a good question. So why would you join a meetup group? I think what Benazir said, if you see something that comes up, maybe...
Mic's not working. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that works. Okay, we can switch, yeah. Okay, yeah. I think it's similar what Benazir said already. Like, if you see something that's from your interest point or from your point of interest, you see some interesting talk at one meetup group, you might just join because of that talk, but maybe you stick around because then you realize there are people mind-liked and you also have good conversations in that meetup group. And of course, you can't join every meetup, but normally I would say people join for the reason that there are interesting talks and topics. And then also if they know people, they come back because they know they meet friends and they meet people that do the same thing to exchange ideas. And becoming an organizer can be, I can speak personally. I think it's interesting to connect to different companies hosting you, but also finding different speakers, enable people to speak at a meetup. I think that's quite rewarding for me to see that that we can get speakers, first-time speakers, and create a better community then as well.
Yeah, and free pizza. That's another one.
Also a very important point.
And maybe to add, join as an organizer, it's really useful if you want to develop other skills than software engineering skills. Kelsey said this morning, as a software engineer now, it should be better, to have different skills like sales and everything. And as an organizer, I have calls with potential sponsors well, then you have to negotiate different things, and that's something that you would usually never have to do as a software engineer. And I think that's actually quite interesting. You get like a different view of the business and how like things run. And yeah, you have sometimes, you know, you have to say things that are hard to say. You can be like, yeah, sponsorship is expensive, and then it's a bit awkward, and then you get better with it.
The way I see it is a bit specific to post-pandemic time, right? We have been through hard times, although it feels like eternity ago. But I think the main reason for many of us is that you want to be surrounded with like-minded people. But I think it's an easy question, like why would you join? Why not, right? What I ask myself as a community leader, first I empathize with the community members, and then the next question I ask, why would they join one more time, right? Why would they join again? So what's the value that we give to them? Or the other one, which is a harder question, how could I persuade them to attend the session, the event I organize, if they knew that they will be only themselves attending, right? Not for the environment, not for being surrounded by like-minded people, but if they merely came themselves, how could I convince them? So when you find an answer to these questions, which is difficult, then you end up organizing something valuable and you make the engagement.
Yeah. Quick show of hands, how many of you are from Berlin or live in Berlin? And how many of you go to regular meetups? How many of you have been any of the meetups that were mentioned?
I can see a few of them here.
Same.
Cool. So the reason I asked that is I go to meetups, and I have seen, like, in London, like, plenty of meetups running around every week. One conversation I've had is, like, not many engineers particularly always join because they feel like it's just like a DevRel thing. Like, okay, if you're a DevRel, you are going to go to meetups, you're going to do stuff, you're going to give talks. But I have not seen like do I have to be there sort of mindset, you know, between people who are not that active in the community. Like for them, I mean, maybe it's also around, some people are introverts, some people are extroverts. I'm an introvert, but I don't think that's a limitation to joining meetups. And that's one of the good traits about a good meetup. If you're an introvert and you're able to communicate with the sponsors, you're the speakers, other attendees, like there's no bottleneck. Like if you're an introvert, no one's going to be like, okay, no, go away. They're all very welcoming. If it does, then it's just not a good code of conduct. So what are your thoughts on that? Like people who feel like, do I have to attend? Like, what is the world going to change if I don't attend? You know, like, because I get that question quite a lot. Like, what's the ROI for me, just apart from, you know, networking and other things, which in itself is a really big thing. But there's this mindset that it's more important for community members or leaders or DevRels. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, you touched a very good, very important point. So we notice some patterns, right? Like between communities, sometimes it almost feels like a competition, and of course, in social media, it's a lot about like the number of people participated and how frequently you attend. So it feels almost like you're watching some superhero movie, and when you miss one, you lost out, right? And you are less social. That's not the way it's supposed to be, because this is part of neurodiversity, right? We give a high importance to that. So we try to emphasize two things to our community members. So first thing is that we organize at least one event every month, right? It's quite frequent already, and it's too much for many of us. And if you can't attend one or two, even for a long time, that's okay. You will make it up, right? And we build personal relations, and we cover them up, and we make them still feel welcome, even if they join us after months, if not years, right? So that's the first thing. And second detail is, so we also notice sometimes when we organize events, like I also attend other sessions, that the first one asking a question, or the one asking the best question, is receiving some prize, right? Here you go, $100 credit for your usage. That doesn't really resonate with the neurodiversity, because as you say, like not everyone is so outgoing, or sometimes you don't want to talk, right? You want to be there and you don't want to talk. So we challenge this, and the way we do is we give people the space. If they want to participate, they can, but if they don't, it's fine, right? So this is It may sound vague, but this is something you have to keep in mind when you are leading, and you have to demand it as a community member. You have to give the feedback if you don't feel that way.
I think also everyone has a different motivation to show up to a meetup, and everyone had a different day before. So maybe someone had a very exhausting day at work, but still thought this one talk I really would like to see. And then it's completely fine if that person is just sitting already in the audience and the rest is networking. There is no need to network if you don't want to network. So I think that's important, not to force something on everyone, and also realizing that this is happening after your working day, and this can be sometimes exhausting, and then it's okay not to be the networking person, but be more on the quiet side, I think.
Yeah, and to resonate with what you said, with in relation to like engineers, we're like, maybe I don't want to go or something. I feel like sometimes also the blame can be on the organizers. Like, as DevWells, we do a lot of content that is also for beginners. So sometimes, you might want to do a meetup that is maybe a bit more advanced, or like maybe more advanced topic, where you have, as you said, like maybe you're going to have fewer attendees, but then, like that's fine. Like it's not only about the numbers. Like when I do the meetup, sometimes I like to actually go really deep into the technical details so engineers can learn, because there's also, in my opinion, this ego of like, yeah, but I already know that. So then it's more like, okay, what can you actually learn, like if you're actually working on it every day. So it's like providing the content that I can also learn something.
I think I'd just like to add that essentially this is fertile ground for broadening your horizons. Really, I would just begin from something as conceptual as that, because when you attend a meetup or two, particularly on topics that you think you're inclined towards, or something that's particularly inspiring to your own career, or things that you want to explore, one of the things that really happens there is that you begin to understand what else is happening here. Like if you're working with Kubernetes, what else is happening, and what are these other companies that may be working on aligned projects or products and things like that. And you're like, I did not know about that. Like I work on this and I did not know about that. And today I learned. Today, that TIL factor, I think that's something that people kind of pick up on in places like this, and in the most relaxed atmosphere. You don't really need to talk to too many people. Sometimes you talk to one or two people there and you're like, oh, okay, you're doing something vastly different from what I'm working on. And potentially I've seen that and grow into potential collaborations where people are like, oh, okay, do you think you want to work on this together? Do you think we could explore this in our free time? And that could lead to something and something and something. So I have several anecdotes of this nature, but I wouldn't want to share specific details. But yeah, this is something that I've noticed happens a lot, and that's very heartwarming as an organizer to watch.
Yeah, and when we pick like venues for like our meetups and local, like Navigate locals, Civo Navigates as well, we're always like, we ask the question, okay, what's the tech community like? So when Sophia announced or anyone announced, like we're doing in Berlin, most people are like, okay, like that's cool. I've never been to Berlin. Like I was like, what's the tech community like? And I think when I say what the tech community is like, I mean how active the ecosystem is, events, contributors, companies, it's the whole ecosystem, right? You all run your own meetup groups. How do you collaborate with each other, or how does that work? Like, is there a friendly competition? Or if someone is like looking to start their meetup group, for example, in Berlin, what sort of mindset do you go with? Do you think that do you see it as a practice, meetup groups collaborating with each other to strengthen the community of the whole city?
I was just discussing this with Stefan at the speakers lounge, that, hey, we should try and collaborate and do something with Kubernetes, Cloud Native, and ML, because that makes so much sense. A lot of folks who are also working with Kubernetes and are looking at aligned AI solutions and ways to go about it would be very happy to hear from him or any of the members in that community group. And the same with, of course, Kadir and Nile and everything. We work together. Kadir and Nile have spoken at Kubernetes and Cloud Native meetups. So you touch on a very important aspect, which to me is something that also resonates personally, is that really fostering that kind of collaboration, that there are commonalities in the things that we're doing, and of course, hosting meetups that speak for both of those groups or more is something that's absolutely welcome.
Yeah, how was it like when you first started? So one of the benefits I see of collaborating with many people is when you're first starting out, you will not get maybe that much response. Like I started a community and everyone was like, okay, what? No worries. But then we collaborated with the other communities, other groups, and then people start showing initiatives and interest, and companies start to sponsor, and you get the numbers and stuff. So Stephen, I know you were going to answer, but like from the collaboration point of view, like when you first started, from there till now. Yeah.
So when we started, I think our first meetup was May 2022 in Berlin. So
2022.
Yeah, the like end of COVID restrictions were April 2022. So all the meetups were dead. So then we're just like, okay, let's just start something new. And then we collaborated. I mean, so I started the MLOps community. So the name was already quite big, and then started a bit with like PyData as well a bit, and tried to collaborate with those. Nowadays, I collaborate more with diversity meetups a bit more, to actually, as like part of a local chapter, it's also like, if I go to a meetup, it's going to be a lot of the same people. So it's also like, how can I reach different people? So that's usually where I go for like trying to collaborate, I would say. So like girls in tech and different things.
You want to go? Sure, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I want to say that I think collaboration is important, and that there is no such a thing that like a competition. I remember when we started here in Berlin with DevOps, the organizer of the DevOps organization, I was not part back then, was just posting in their group about our meetup, because he said that's maybe an interest for our community as well, and we like to share that as well, and I think we are happy to help each other out in that regards, and obviously it's also good for the community if there is not competition but more collaboration.
But yeah, also I work more in AI now, so like you do like AI meetups everywhere in Berlin. So what I like is that technically, yes, there's some competition. Like like I did a meetup last week, and then there were 3 other meetups the same day about AI. But then what I like is I see it more as like, oh, how can I make my meetup better, or how what I can learn from them. Because like they have different formats. AI Tinkerers, for example, is a very different format. It's 5-minute talk, and people seem to like that. So maybe I should add that to my meetup, and I think that's more the way I see it than more like competition purely.
From our perspective, I mean, first thing to ask when you are talking about a competition, then the next would be competition of what, right? And most likely the answer would be the competition of attention, right? That she attends to our community event instead of X community's event, right? And of course, this is not something we are running after. I think you all agree with me on this, because we are most of the time doing it on top of our everyday work. We are taking the extra step to represent our community and the members that we talk about. However, the sponsors, the businesses that we represent, sometimes they are looking for a competition, right? They are seeing it as a channel to catch up some developers or companies or business opportunities and so on. And I don't find it very healthy. And this approach is basically putting pressure on not only on communities, but also people attending, because we already have enough pressure on our shoulders throughout the day, right? Then why do you do that also with our free time that we choose to go to a community event instead of staying in our warm homes, right? So this is not really healthy, but I think I also see the reflection on communities, like we have friends here, that we are responding to that, and we are not playing that competition game, and that's what makes Berlin beautiful as well.
Mm.
Maybe one thing, because you mentioned it about the companies, we once had the situation that a company said, can you guarantee us that you have 50 attendees at the meetup, then we sponsor? And we basically said no, because we can't guarantee that we have 50 people at the meetup, and it's not about the number of people that are attending. A meetup can be as good with 10 people or with 50 people, it doesn't matter. If you want to sponsor, you also sponsor for 10, and that way the company backed off, but we couldn't guarantee that, because we also don't want to put that pressure on our shoulder that you said, that we make sure that 50 people attend the meetup in the end. For me, that's not about the meetup itself, the number of attendees.
That's a very good point. I've seen that, especially in like when getting sponsors for like local meetups. Yeah, and then if you promise that, then you have to, then you get stressed, and it's just a whole burden. Yeah, no, I agree. For the people who are watching, and it's being recorded as well, what advice would you give to someone who wants to get started with just attending meetups, being active in the community? Like, any action items, what can they do right now?
Start anywhere. If you find a meetup page, if you find an event page, or you hear about it through someone, doesn't have to be social media, it can be word of mouth, and you have two friends who go like, I kind of vaguely remember attending this one meetup, and I always remember they were warm and friendly, and it was really nice. And I had these two amazing conversations with people I didn't expect to meet. That's enriching enough. And considering that it's something that you do at the end of your day, someday during the week, could be a Thursday, could be a Friday, different meetups have different days and different kinds of cadences. If there's something that you feel like, yes, this is something that I could benefit from, if not anything else, I would probably find a mentor. I would probably find, that's still a far cry, but I would still find someone who's probably in the same boat as me, so I know I'm not alone in this. If I feel like, oh, there's so much to learn and there's so much to catch up, I'm not a JavaScript person, for instance, but, oh my God, there's like just so much that, I don't know perhaps that I still require, that I'm still learning, and I'm not at an advanced level. That's probably a place where you will find other folks who may be in the same boat as you. So that's a reason to go, and that's how you kind of build like, some sort of formidable character where you go like, okay, it's, I'm not the only one here, and maybe this is our community. This is where we can start. We can help each other out. So I would say that's a key point that people should think of.
I think imposter syndrome is a big reason why many people don't even take the initiative to go. It's just this feeling like, what do I bring to the table? Which I think is not right. I mean, it's natural to feel that way, but it's not a bad thing.
Yeah, and honestly, just come to the organizers. Like, we're always very happy to have people. It's what I like is that you're gonna come and we've done the meetup for like a while, and we get into this routine. You're gonna come with new ideas, which are gonna be different, which are gonna make the meetup even better. So that's usually the way. And even if you don't have the skills in whatever the meetup is doing, like organizing a meetup is not about, like, I organize AI meetups. I use AI a bit, but it's not, if you're not an AI expert, it's fine, Like, we always need help. And if you think I have my things together when I organize a meetup, you're very wrong. Like, you should see the mess behind it, so that, if I have help, then it's even better. So don't just come to the organizers. We're usually always very happy to have new people.
Yeah, I think, first of all, like, I want to tell a few details. Like, if you want to be active in the meetup, like, be in the kitchen side of community development, community leadership, right? Just one nuance that makes me thoughtful. People expect that you are an engineer, some person with a lot of experience for so many years and so on, and you have to be like a guru in the field, either to organize or to give a talk. That's not the case, right? We want to make it applicable to everybody, and there is nothing wrong if you are even new to your field, right? You can be active in the community. So that would be my first concrete advice. But then, from another perspective to your question, I think everyone here is already a kind of community. The moment you attend a conference, the moment you watch a video on YouTube and comment or give a like or do nothing, tell to your cousin about it, right? Then you are part of some sort of community, because it's all about interacting with a like-minded peer as you are, right? I also don't think just because we have a meetup page and a few thousand members, a few hundred members, that we have the ownership to the word community, right? You are a community, Kunal. You inspired a lot of people in your country with all the videos you made, with all the teaching you made back then, even now, right? You inspired a lot of people. So it is what it is, right? And that's the way I see it. And I think everyone should appreciate it and carry on with being active and looking for more.
Yeah, thank you.
I'd also like to cite the other end of the spectrum. That, for instance, we had Jerome Petazzoni come in and give a talk at the relaunched meetups when we actually merged the Kubernetes and cloud native meetups at the end of 2023. And yeah, so it was a packed house. It was absolutely houseful, and as you can imagine. And expecting from him, he gave like a KubeCon level talk. But people at a meetup level really got to witness that and interact with him. And you don't really, it's somehow the barriers in a conference are probably higher, a little higher because of also the setup and the setting and everything. So no matter how close and intimate you are, and that's a conference, right? That it serves its own purpose. It has its own bases and all of that. But at a meetup, suddenly you really absolutely don't have that formality. It's probably like even closer to going like everyone's just dunking into a slice of pizza at the same time, and there's probably like an interaction and FAQ happening built into his talk. And people learned a lot from that. So, while there's this end of the spectrum that, yeah, start from anywhere and you could make friends, just as something as simple as that, there's the other end of the spectrum where you meet some stalwart or some of your heroes and, they're kind of giving these talks and you're like, I'm so glad I came. Yeah.
Cool. Right. Well, thanks for sharing. And my next question is, obviously there are a bunch of stuff you can do at meetups. There are hackathons, there's talks, people talk. But how do you encourage collaboration outside meetups? I mean, ever since I graduated, all my friends I've made have been via meetups. I don't know if that's a good thing. Like Nelly, for example, Diana, Peter, all the people, Marino, and all my friends are like only from events and conferences, which is nice. I like it. But how do you encourage your community members to collaborate and foster outside the meetup groups?
I mean, I think that's a little bit harder than doing the meetup. We started a Discord channel for our meetup group, but we realized quite soon it became quite quiet in there. So there was not that much going on, but we tried to put some photos after meetups, also on the pages. And then I think some parts we don't know how the collaboration goes on because people meet at a meetup, but you don't know everyone who's meeting each other. And I think that's a part where people start collaborating outside of your meetup, but that comes not back to you as an organizer. So maybe two people figured out, hey, we work on the same thing. Maybe let's exchange some ideas because you work for a different company. And I feel what you have told here today or what your talk was so interesting. I want to learn more. And those things is hard for me to track, at least as an organizer.
Yeah, one thing I can add, my suggestion, my humble suggestion would be to whoever wants to lead the community, observe and listen, right? The ideas, the decisions, the change of the structure should not, does not have to come from you directly, right? It shouldn't be your vision. You are just one part of a big community chain, right? And if we have time, I would like to give an example about this. So I'm sure most of you imagine the same way. You go to a community event. I try my best to not say meetup, right? Because there are also things happening outside meetup. And when you go to a community event, the setting is more or less always the same. It's like theatrical setting, right? 20 to 50 seats, chairs, all listed like a cinema. And then one person talks and pizza break, and then the second person talks, right? That's how we see it. So, but when you think in the end of the day, it's a lot of people, but more or less, if you don't count those asking questions and moderators, it's only 2 persons giving input the entire evening, right? And most of the time, people find a moment to breathe when they are eating slice of pizza and getting to know each other. So we wanted to challenge that, right? We wanted to do it a little bit different. So we activated 2 concepts. First one is Ask Me Anything. So we bring experts or some of our volunteers from the community that you go there, you ask your question or you share your anecdote, and then we all share our opinion. We all exchange. That's the first one. And the second one we do is the workshops, right? And in the workshops, we do the designing in such a way that we do small round tables and we separate people into different groups, group of 4, and they have to work together, right? So they get to know each other. When they're stuck, they help each other. And then you collaborate, right? So there are some solutions to this one. And believe it or not, these ideas came from our community members. We were not geniuses to find that out, right? They said, hey, I saw something like that, can we do it? And we listened to them. So speak up, and when they speak up to you, do it, right? And it helps.
Cool. Right. Next point I want to discuss is as an organizer, like there might be some hurdles. And I think one of the big aspects of running a successful meetup group or a conference is sponsors. So you need sponsors for venue, you need pizza, drinks, all these other things, sometimes speakers as well. So how can tech companies, help meetup groups to help them thrive and grow? Like what recommendations would you give? And also when you reach out to companies, they always ask, what's in it for us? Because that's the world we live in. So what would you suggest? Like, obviously, support us, but also the why. Why would companies do it?
I think we quickly talked about it actually before, was like the way I see it, like Get Your Guide, for example, I go there quite often for meetups. They have an amazing venue. And I was asking them, how do you always have the money, to like host it, pay for drinks and food? And they're like, you have to see it the way of like, if you sponsor a meetup, I don't know, it's going to be like 2,000 euros or something. But if you're actually hiring, that's usually there'll be the case. Like you're sponsoring because you're hiring or you want to sell your product. But then if you want to hire, you're going to spend 2,000 euros. Maybe you're actually going to hire someone. Or like even if you sponsor 4 meetups, it's going to be 8,000 euros. Then you hire someone. If you were to pay a recruiter for that, that would be way more than that. And if you sponsor a local community, then you're likely to also hire someone that already lives there. So then you don't have to pay for relocation packages and stuff. So like in the end, I mean, they were telling me like even if we do like a meetup a month for the entire year, it's 12,000 euros. In the end, we hire 1 or 2 people and it's already worth it. So that's one thing that company can get out of it. Then if you're targeting developers, it's a bit different. You're going to talk about like branding and stuff. But that's one way to see it, I would say.
I think it can be also interesting if your company is not related directly with tech. Maybe you have a different business, but you use really cool technologies, but no one knows about it. Then especially if you host a meetup and you have normally, I think it's normal that the host or the venue host can do a little introduction. And if you do that interestingly enough and tell people, for example, about your tech stack, although you might be a supermarket chain or something like that, that can excite people for your technology stack, but also maybe potentially to work for you and see differently at the organization, and I think that can be helpful for them.
Just don't try to force it. Don't be too salesy, please.
For sure.
That's like a huge red flag otherwise.
I think at the heart of it is, of course, the scope of visibility that you give those companies. I fully understand meeting business needs, but for instance, if you genuinely have this, principle also in your company where you're invested in diversity and inclusion, where you're invested in things like doing things for the community and all of that. It's one of the ways that you can drive this is also by, telling your company internally, which is the truth, and also kind of partaking it externally with interested sponsors that you're essentially driving community growth this way. If you're driving community growth, for instance, in our case, cloud native community growth and everything, you're essentializing the adoption of cloud-native technologies, which is something that has been happening for a while, but you're part of that process, and you're part of, a very active process at that, and you want to be a face of that. And that visibility is important because ultimately it does get you the business that you need. It does drive business growth. And so while it's an organic process, and while there's a lot of factors like engaging conversations which are more word of mouth, when you get those things going and you get some of those folks to kind of also tell on record that, yes, they benefited from a meetup or two, when they really did, that's kind of one of the ways to kind of increase and enhance the scope of visibility for sponsors and make sure they're hooked and they're invested and, they kind of keep coming back again and again. And hopefully with no clauses like, give me your attendee list and, things like that. And we've had some success in driving that. And not had to kind of go overboard in terms of the attendee details and things like that. So I'm quite grateful for that, personally, in the Berlin tech scene.
Yeah, I agree with Benazir. I think it's a very good point. But on top of that, I would like to add, Berlin has its own dynamics, right? Or let's say Germany. But then in a developing country, it's a bit different story, right? And I also am in touch with some communities, tech communities in developing countries. And my direct suggestion to them would be talk with government, some governmental agencies, local libraries, go humble. It doesn't have to be the most flashy room or whatever. All you need is a room to gather people, and that's good to go, and usually you get support. And then the other story is Berlin is, I don't know, 5.5 million, right? And we have quite a big workforce, right? But then in small cities, it's also another challenge, right? And then you have your local companies, right? Go to them a little bit that you don't only represent your tech community, but you also represent your city, right? So it's also in long term, as Stephen mentioned, that it gives a kind of like idea that, oh, there is something going on in the city, right? Even though it's 50,000 people. So that can be a catchy point for them. But when we reach out to companies and when we talk to them, of course we are in a good position, right? It's AWS and it's in Berlin, right? Wow, flashy and all that. So it gives us quite a privilege, to be honest. But the way we use it still, as Stephen mentioned, we want to make sure it's not a sales pitch, right? We want to make sure it's not a sponsorship. You do that favor to the community, and maybe you get nothing in return, right? If you accept these conditions, you should be there. If you have a different agenda and different expectation, then we are already having a wrong conversation, right? So they are picky. We have been rejected by many businesses with our approach, but we are also picky. But at least it's going healthier. I believe in that. So that's what I can say.
Yeah, and another good point now that I remember is a lot of companies, they are investing in hosting their own meetups. So, which is fine. We do disruptive tech as well, which is a meetup we do in London and some other cities, which is backed by Civo. But what do you think is some of the key things to keep in mind for a company that is running a meetup? Because for me, it's totally different. If I'm going to a meetup that is like DevOps or just a generic platform engineering meetup, I'm going to treat it like a bit more on the community end. I feel like it's more. I just assume that it's going to be more community friendly. It'll be more organic. If it's like by a company, I feel like I'll be sold to, and there's going to be some pitch or something, which is fine. I get it. It's about raising awareness. But from the company point of view, what can the companies do who are hosting their own local meetups? And what are some of the mistakes you've seen people make?
Well, I run one that is actually sponsored by my employer.
No, the one that the company runs, a company that runs a local meetup for their own, like.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, this one is different. I would say this. I mean, maybe you want to go for it, but like for me, it's just. Yeah, don't try to be salesy. Don't try, to like really honestly, like if you just going for like to be a sales speech and look at how amazing we are, look like how amazing our office is, and you're not gonna talk about anything that is technical or anything that is informative to people. You just don't do it.
I guess it depends also a little bit, right? Because there are companies having open source project. That means they have a community per se. And if they start hosting a meetup, that was the case in my previous job, they have community already using their tool. And then this community naturally exists already. So they can host a company meetup sponsored by the company itself, because they also have something that everyone can use for free. And of course, it's binded to the company. But in that case, I think the community exists already around the project, for example, and not around the company itself.
This may sound counterintuitive, but have a generic CFP of some sort, even if it's a meetup, and make sure you give very good talks from your competitors a chance. And I can say this in a very informed way because I also organized this event called Cloud Native Rejects. And that's one of the things, and while I organize it as part of Microsoft.
You organize rejects?
Yes.
I did not know that. I love rejects. No idea.
So yeah, I mean, so that's one of the things we do. I mean, there's an independent program committee that could have some other folks absolutely different folks in your own company who are not invested in anything that you're doing, and some other folks from totally different companies. Make sure it's a broad spectrum so everyone has a say. So your median score on those CFPs and everything, and on the scoring of all the talks is pretty fair. And you actually give good talks from your competitors a chance. And that really increases your visibility as, oh, they're doing this. Like, how secure are you? It's that factor of just kind of making sure you give a platform to folks who genuinely have something great to say about, things that they are working on. And for all you know, they're talking about challenges in their product and things like that. And you gain valuable insights also out of it. That also has a business case, I'm pretty sure. So, yeah.
No, couldn't agree more. Cloud native rejects, how many of you have heard about rejects? Just 2 people. Okay.
Very
3, 4.
dedicated rejects community members there.
So Rejects is like, KubeCon is one of the biggest cloud native conferences, and Rejects is a conference where you can submit if you get rejected from KubeCon. So it's a day before KubeCon. I think
usually there are
2
better
days
talks.
now. And it's in Salt Lake City. Are you doing in India?
We were talking about it, but probably, this year might not be possible, but Reject Salt Lake City on November 10 and 11.
Cool. That brings me to a next question, which is, I'm sure many of folks may have thought about it in a while. You're a meetup organizer, conference organizer, so you obviously get a lot of speakers, submissions, interests, and you mentioned call for proposals. A call for proposal, if you don't know, it's you see a conference or a meetup and you give them a proposal that we want to speak at your conference, and then the organizers review and then they select the good ones, and then you get to speak like we are doing right now. So how do you, for the audience, how do you write a good CFP? What is it that you look for when someone submits a CFP, and any tips you'd like to give them so that they can submit to Civo Navigate next time?
Rejects.
Or rejects. Let's just start this way. Yeah.
I was having actually Nela and I were having a very interesting conversation with Mario from Kubernetes outside. And he was one of the reviewers for Container Days Hamburg, where I just recently spoke. It was last week. And I actually asked him, so from your perspective, as someone who is reviewing, what are the top 3 things that you are looking for? What are the things that you genuinely just look at? And he shared a very interesting insight, which I don't know if he wants me to share it, but I will in any case. He mentioned that, there's after compiling the amount of time it takes all of the reviewers to review around 400 to 500 proposals that come in, it takes an average of 30 seconds for the reviewer to make a decision. And one of the top things there is, of course, your title. And it doesn't just have to be a catchy one, but it also kind of gives everyone a little bit of an insight already into what your talk could be about. And also at the same time, there's an element of surprise, there's an element of intrigue. Sure, I want to know more about this now. And the abstract is basically like the most obvious, the quickest summary of what your idea is really about. So if you're really talking about scaling somewhere and everything, and you already have a story to tell, how you summarize that in about 2-3 sentences or something like that. And of course, there's an optional description where you can kind of break down the structure of your talk, but that's not necessary. Like sometimes you just look at this caption and you look at the abstract and you make a decision very quickly. Yeah.
I would like to say one thing. What we look for at the meetups is no vendor talks. So we are not interested in someone pitching a specific tool that you need to, or that someone needs pay for. And I have to say, unfortunately, we are not in the situation that we get a 500 CFPs for our meetups. So it's way easier to also, if you want to start your speaking, or if you want to start speaking, it's easier to start at a meetup normally. And also, we are not super strict on the CFP. I also like to talk to people. We welcome first-time speakers because I think that's a that's the one part about Meetups, that it's not all about a professional conference, but it should be also for people the space to start speaking about what they work on, to start public speaking, and we are there for help. And we also try to reach out to a few folks because we want to make our speaker on the lineup diverse, and that's not happening if you just put out a CFP. So we also try to reach out, but we are also super happy if people come to us with an idea, and we try to manage that in the schedule. So.
And yeah, we agree with everything. And I'll just add one thing is like, make sure you tell people what they're going to learn at the end, you know, like it's always like, why should they come to your talk? You know, like they're here to learn about something. So it's like, what would they take home with them? Usually that makes a difference. And also avoid having delve or dive, you know, that's like ChatGPT, like CFP. So like try to take the time actually to write it, and, you know, like it makes a difference, I feel like.
Yeah, I'm going to skip that one. Because I apply to a lot of conferences and I get rejected over and over, so I must.
Okay, so
The opposite of him, basically.
I'm not the guy.
there's a different question for you. So the question for you is, what do you do? I get rejected a lot as well, especially KubeCon, because the acceptance rate is like less than 10%. So what do you do if your CFP gets rejected? Yeah.
I move on. I keep learning about it, right? And I keep sharing my opinion with the people around me, right? And yeah, that's it.
Do you tweak it a little bit before you submit to the next event, or do you just same?
Same. If I feel the need to talk about a topic, I don't do it to attract an attention so that the auditorium, the classroom, whatever that I'm in, will bring in a lot of people, right? Also, it might be the perspective of the conference, I don't know. But the way I do is I ask myself, how does the topic evolve? What I want to talk about, right? Where does it go? And what more can I say about this? And how right am I? How wrong am I? How fresh am I on the topic, right? And whether it gets rejected again or accepted, that's another story. But I keep building on top of it, like Lego, like you mentioned, right? So that's all from my side.
Yeah, I have a different strategy, so I also get rejected, and it's more like then I check who has been accepted, and then I'm like, oh, actually, yeah, you know what they were writing. Like now I understand, you know, like I really get it. What they're going to talk about, it's actually very interesting, and I'm going to learn that, you know. And then I'm like, you know, it's like put my ego on the side, and I'm like, actually, the abstract was way better, you know.
You know, some people, I've spoken to them, every time it happens at KubeCon, they get an opposite feeling. They're like, oh, mine was better.
Yeah, KubeCon is always like that. It's always like,
they're all confused. It's like, what happened? So
I'm still on 100% rate at KubeCon though. So.
About rejected CFPs, yeah. I mean, that happens, right? So I feel similar as Kadir. If I have a topic that I know that is good, I will, sometimes if the conference is small, you can reach out and you can ask, right? You can ask, can you give me some reasons, what could I make better in this CFP? Or do you think the topic is not relevant? And that's okay. I think you also don't want to end up at a conference with a topic that's not relevant for the audience, because then maybe you have no people listening. That's also not nice, right? But yeah, I think you can learn from it if people give you feedback. If you feel your topic is strong, I would also just submit it somewhere else and see if that gets accepted. Or I go to a meetup and see how the people like it at a meetup, because that's also a very good first try for a talk, right? So to see how people like it.
Yep. What I also do is if I get rejected, I will just turn it into a blog post and publish it.
Yes, that's a DevRel strategy.
So that's what I do. It's fine. No worries. Then I think of something else. But I also do what Stephen does. I check who got accepted. And before submitting, I saw who got accepted last year, what sort of talks. And the third thing is I check the industry trends, which brings me to the other point is how do you as meetup organizers drive the conversation around hot topics?
For me, I would say that, of course, we also don't really go through 400 proposals for a meetup. No. It's a very generic Google form, actually, that circulates through our kinfolk handles and anyone who reaches out to me and everything. And it's a matter of finding the time and suitability for your speaking slot and going with it. But driving the conversation around hot trends actually comes pretty much on the basis of what speakers or interested speakers are themselves thinking about. And from that emerges a little bit of a trend, like for instance, AI and Kubernetes and things like that. And we were talking about that with Stefan earlier and all of that. And we've slowly started seeing those kind of proposals trickling in, or people interested in talking about those kind of things and all of that. So in many ways, it's quite like self-sustaining, like the relevance of topics, because, especially with meetups and things like that, there are some regulars, of course, and some of them are also seated here and everything. So if they want to come by the next time, they go like, actually, I'm thinking about this, and either me or someone that I work with or something like that is most suited to give this talk. And what do you think about it? And I'm like, just submit it through the form and everything. We'll take a look, and maybe there are a few notes here and there, but mostly yes, you're welcome to pursue that topic. So that to me organically drives the trends. Because people are working with these things, they are thinking about these things, and at meetups they also talk about it, and from that organically emerges new topics. Yeah.
I think what's interesting as a hot topic is, for me, what's interesting for the community. So it doesn't need to be like the newest technology or whatever, but one way to find that out is organizing, for example, with your meetup group an unconference. So let people submit what they want to hear about, and see what topics come up, and then people can rate it and rank it, and then you get a feeling what is an interest for this group specifically, what do this group want to hear about, and from that you can drive an agenda for example, an unconference, but also for further topics and talks.
Yeah, I think a little bit in parallel to you, Nele, like to us it becomes obvious what the hot topic is, right? It's no mystery. Like right now is Gen AI, a year ago it was serverless, before it was Web3, blockchain, Bitcoin, whatever, right? Before that, I don't even remember what. So there is this thing, and of course, like when you talk to your community members, you already know about it, because they ask, hey, when will you have something about Gen AI? So it's obvious, right? But then the concern for me is not to repeat what they already hear, right? What they hear on YouTube, what they hear on the conferences they attend, hearing the same stuff, because most of the time, the people leading communities, we are coming from engineering background, and then we ask each other wrong questions, right? So we ask each other too much technical questions sometimes. The vision should be a little broader than that. So as we heard in the morning with Kelsey Hightower, sometimes we have to have a little broader social or ethical aspects to whatever technology you are using or talking about. So we also bring it into our conversation. This is what we aim to do most of the time. Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess I work like a lot in the hype world, working in AI, and I think I'm just trying to, like, there's one subject that we've been talking about for like a year, it's like RAG. And if I start a meetup and I'm like, hey, I'm going to talk about RAG, you can see the eyes of the people, they're like, oh man, I've heard this subject like 30 times. Like, so then it's also like sometimes you have hyped, but then, like going maybe back into the basics, or like, going back into like the engineering can also be good for the meetup group, I feel like.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Like, to escape the hype cycle, go to the basics, and everything becomes clear. Cool. I think we have like around 5 minutes or something left, so we can take some questions. If anyone has any questions, sure, raise the hands. Yep.
I'm Marco. I'm co-organizing the DevRel meetup in Berlin, and since I have a bunch of Berlin-based DevRels,
Nice to meet you.
Sure, sign me up.
Sure. I had no idea actually about this one. So.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is it on meetup.com?
Or is it on Luma or both? Okay. But yeah, happy to join for sure.
So I think, what can you do as a meetup organizer to bring your meetup out in the public, in the eyes? So for example, they gave a good example. So what can you do as an organizer that you already, you come across that meetup group?
I mean, we talked about that. Meetup.com is great because a lot of people are already on the platform, and if you are in Berlin and you post a new meetup group there, people will get notifications and will see that this is up. Then I think there is Luma as well, which is more on a calendar base, where people can also see what's going on in Berlin on a calendar. And then I guess it's social media, but I feel from our perspective, what helped us to start the meetup group was really the platform meetup.com, because already a lot of people look for meetups on that platform.
Cool. And it's actually trying to find new meetups, you know, it's like going back into like being an attendee only and like actually checking out new meetups because like, yeah, that's it.
Yeah, and this is a good example, like sharing about, what's the meetup called again? Okay, everyone check it out. Anyone else? I think we have time for one more question.
DevRel Meetup Berlin.
Any final question? Yep.
Maybe not the question, but the idea. I noticed that many conferences are focused on the very narrow topics, like we have even KubeCon, like we talk about CNCF technologies and stuff. But what I really miss in most of the meetups is the business perspective. Like decision makers who are spending money on development teams are not on those meetups. And then we have engineers who enter those meetups, they see, we speak technical stuff, yeah, technology and language. What I see is a struggle is when this engineer comes back to the company and he says, I have a nice new open tofu, which is way better than Terraform. We should invest in this because it's more declarative, blah, 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 engineering stuff. And this manager is like, it's nice you learned something. Yeah, he completely does not understand what we're talking about. And my question is, how to encourage CEOs, CIOs, CTOs maybe are here, but how to encourage decision makers to actually come to meetups?
We did this in London. What we did is we did Kieran's right there, the man behind Disruptive Tech London meetups. So I think we branded it specifically for executives, and we saw them show up. It just literally was in the title, Founders Meetup, networking with founders in London. People showed up. That has worked for us. Like if we say that, it's going to be a bunch of founders. Yeah. You can't have everything. I don't know. But no, I think engineers should show up as well, because they want to network with. If you tell someone that there's going to be a bunch of founders in a room, you know engineers will show up. They obviously. So we had a good mix of people, and I think it was our most popular meetup. It was like packed. It was like, and there were no talks. It was like packed. But yeah, think any thoughts on that?
No, exactly the same.
We don't have time. Yeah. Cool.
And you will need sushi, not pizza.
And I think I did one meetup like that, which was a mix. So actually addressing that, like there was, he's like the director of a big VC fund. So then we had the business part, and then I was the second talk. So then there was like one very business, one very very tech. But basically everyone business related left. So then that's fine, you know. But it's just you can't have everything, yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, that was it. Thank you for joining the panelists. Appreciate you giving the time. Hope you have a good conference. And yeah, thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.